According to this video, New York City is forcing people to leave Brooklyn forever. Don't know what that means. But I know that we got to get out of the cities because they're falling apart. So let's just see what he's got to say about it. Looks like it's going to be like a documentary style.
Brooklyn is quickly becoming one of the hardest places to live in New York City, and residents are being forced out. Why is that?
New Yorkers are fuming after already seeing the biggest rent hike last year.
People cannot afford the apartments they have.
Brooklyn rents are up 25% year over year.
There's a supply shortage, there's a much greater demand, and people are priced out of the housing market.
Tenant advocates argue any hike will increase poverty and homelessness.
Oh, what's up, man? How are ya? Good.
I can tell you what causes all these issues. It's the people that get voted into these offices that don't actually do anything other than enrich themselves and their friends.
Come on in. Awesome. Oh, this is it right here?
Yeah, so this is your typical Brooklyn apartment. What you're about to see is what you can typically expect living in Brooklyn.
But before we see what Brooklyn renters are facing, if they can even manage to find an apartment, it's important to understand why most New York City residents can't even afford to live here in the first place and are being forced out.
It's a bit of an enigma to everyone that the velocity and the prices have gone up. And part of that has to do with the fact that potential buyers have sat out because rates have been high.
Now, New York City is the most expensive city in America, and this year the average price for an apartment rental in Manhattan, $5,600 a month was what it peaked at. And part of the reason for that is that it's very hard to buy a house. If you want to buy a house, the mortgage rate is going to be through the roof. So most people are waiting to see if rates come down, and they've got to live somewhere, so they rent, which puts even more demand on an already strained rental market that doesn't have enough apartments. Now, if you want to rent a $5,600 apartment, you've got to make 40 times the monthly rent. That's how much money that is. You better be working at Google, you better be in finance, you better be at a big law firm. It's hard to get a job that even pays that much. And if you can afford to rent that apartment,
That is a crazy amount of money to me. Because where I live, people with that much money are considered extremely rich. Like, you've got multiple houses, you've got boats, you've got land somewhere else. That's what $200,000 looks like where I live. But that's what you need to live in a decent place in New York City. No, thank you.
you're earning more money than 89% of America. And that's why many aspiring New Yorkers in the past once looked to Brooklyn for an affordable place to live. For many years, the New York City real estate market fluctuated greatly based on location. This was prior to work from home, which is relatively recent. And normally, the closer you live to a subway station or a popular part of Manhattan, like Midtown or downtown, the higher your monthly rent would normally be, and the smaller your apartment would be. It's been a pure location game for a long time. And you used to be able to move to Brooklyn, save a little bit of money on rent in exchange for more time commuting to certain.
Looking back and watching movies that took place in the 80s and 90s, man, it's just sad. Like, it looked like a cool place to be, even though it was like usually dark and some places are scary, you know. It still seemed like it was a cool place to be with the pizza and the Ninja Turtles and, you know. Even back in the when the original Spider-Man movies came out. Like, you saw a lot of the city. I don't think you see very much of the city in the new Spider-Man movies. They do a whole lot of leaving New York and doing battles in the sky and going to space. Yeah, they ain't trying to show off what New York looks like now.
parts of Manhattan because we've got to cross a bridge or go under the river in order to get there. But since 2020 and the advent of work from home, all of that has changed. People who used to want to live in Manhattan because they could get a small apartment near their office and live a convenient life now no longer need that convenience. So they're looking at certain parts of Brooklyn where they can get a comparatively larger apartment, and that's what's pushing prices up.
In that same report, it also revealed that Brooklyn rents are up 25% year over year.
A 25% rent increase. That is bonkers. Most people don't get a 25% increase in pay. And if you live in Brooklyn and your rent goes up like that, you might not be able to stay. And that's why people are leaving. Look at these prices.
You're gonna have to.
$3,300 for a studio, a one bedroom 38. Look at this chart. This is what rents have done in Brooklyn. That's insane. If you moved in here, you're not still living here when it's up here unless your income also went with that curve. And this is the affordable part of New York City, not the unaffordable part. And this is still unaffordable.
You know what's gonna happen? Some rich guy that has money not in New York is gonna come into New York, build a whole bunch of houses, and make all the money because there's so much demand and not hardly any supply. Somebody's gonna come in and supply it, or they're doomed. Even if they do supply it, like, how are they gonna keep the crime levels at bay? You're gonna have to vote in the right people, man.
This is a cool place.
Very cool, man. One bed, one bath, $31.95.
Comes with a private backyard too, I'm guessing, huh?
Yeah, it does, and it's a nice one.
A little wet today for being in a backyard, but man, that is absolutely nice. There's no street noise because we're not facing the street.
Yeah, it's a rare layout because it has 3 rooms, but it also has a separate living.
I can't tell if they're joking. Is this actually nice for New York? Because that's really sad. You can rent a house for $400 a month where I live. That's for something that's a little bit, you know, around the same size, maybe a little bit bigger, but you'd actually get a yard.
Living room and kitchen. I kind of like it.
So normally the kitchen would be here.
Yeah, typically.
Split units.
You got one of these in every room.
Nice.
Pretty nice, yeah.
Alex, this looks like a recent renovation. Is that the case?
That is the case.
In your opinion, is this bigger than a lot of apartments in this price range?
Yeah, absolutely. This makes a great living room because you have the outdoor space here. There's gonna be a lot of foot traffic. No place better to spend some time than right here.
I guess there's no power.
Not today.
When people move out, there's no electricity.
Yeah, this is a great spot for a real kitchen.
Oh, this area right over here?
Yeah.
It feels like one of the few apartments where you can have people over without too many challenges, I guess.
I'd say you're right. Yeah, the actual bedroom is over here. It's pretty nice.
It's pretty bright even on a day like today.
Yeah.
What size bed do you think this is gonna fit?
Queen pretty easily.
Queen? We are first floor, but I see lots of window bars. That's nice.
It's slightly elevated despite being on the ground floor, so you're not actually on the ground. And before they had the split unit ACs, you can fit a AC window unit right in here.
Oh, that's why it's like a box.
Exactly.
What's the size of this room?
Roughly 80 square feet.
Yeah, queen bed, I guess, like right here.
Definitely.
Oh, look at that. It's like a Manhattan walk-in closet. These people across the street are probably paid way more than we are over here.
Oh, yeah.
$31.95. You gotta make, what, 40 times the rent for this one?
Yeah.
So $127,000 has to be your income.
Yeah, Brooklyn.
$127,000 for that. You'd be living on the lake for $127,000 here. Have your own personal dock.
Sky high right now, but they are not as sky high as Manhattan. This is only $31.95 right across the river. A place like this is almost double the money.
In Manhattan for this price, do you think it would be anywhere near this big or no?
No, not at all.
Sometimes
Unsustainable.
it is unsustainable, and it is a huge factor when you talk about all the other things that we're paying more for.
So it seems like what's been slowly happening over the years, the slow pricing out of former residents in Brooklyn has only accelerated recently. And now that inflation for like groceries and gasoline and basically everything else is happening on top of massive rent increases, you have a greater amount of people whose incomes aren't keeping pace with the local rents than ever before. And there is a 19.2% poverty rate in Brooklyn, and the rent to income ratio for people in Brooklyn is over 30%. Typically, a person whose rent to income ratio is over 30% is gonna have a tough time paying for things like medical expenses, auto repairs, food, clothing, other basic necessities.
You're not even gonna be paying for medical expenses with that. You're gonna go into medical debt. There is no paying for medical expenses with that kind of money.
And the other crazy thing is, here in Brooklyn, rents are rising so fast that even if you sign a long-term lease, like let's say you sign a 2-year lease, when you go to re-sign in 2 years, rent could be 30, 40, even 50% higher than what you just signed at, and you're still gonna have to leave. So there's like no protection for anybody. And if moving to New York's affordable neighborhood isn't really a good long-term proposition, I don't know how anybody's gonna be able to stay here for more than a few years.
It's just going to get worse and worse until people are either going to have to leave or there's going to be so many homeless people. And at that point, you just got a statewide refugee camp. Like, is that what they want? Probably.
Dude, this is really good, man. We got decent looking appliances in here.
I like this design. They did what they could, despite having a wall right there. You got some windows, you got some cabinets. It's pretty level. You have a fridge that opens the right way. I mean, whoever put this together, it's not stupid.
It's actually a pretty smart design because it doesn't take up hardly any space. Water's really good. I like everything about this, to be honest with you. I've seen some apartments where they block the windows to add maybe like an extra cabinet or something here, but I'm glad they kept it open. You could cook with company here.
Again.
And you wouldn't bump into somebody.
Not at all.
And look at these drawers. You can have stuff on both sides and you can close it without a catastrophe. You can put a little wastebasket in here. Oh, and it's clean too. This is where all the problems in an apartment are usually hiding and waiting for you. If the rent on this were to go up 25%, what would it be?
It would be about $4,000.
So this is a free marketplace, but if it were stabilized, would that offer you some protection from rent increases?
In the short term, yes, it would. But in the long term, this may become unaffordable. There's about a 3% increase they could give you each year. In 10 years, who knows what that becomes?
Their emotional pleas resonated in the room. Tenants trying to convince the city's rent guidelines board on Thursday night to not increase their rents.
This meeting took place over the...
They're just wanting to not increase it. Not even, they don't even, I mean, they would like a decrease, but they're just talking about don't increase it. That's not even really a big ask. You know how much money it would take for the government to cover a little bit of that cost that people are having to pay that they can't afford? Significantly less than the money we've been spending on wars that have gone nowhere.
Summer, when the Rent Guidelines Board was meeting to discuss what the new rates would be for people who live in affordable apartments. Those rents went up too. Basically, in New York City, you've got 2 tiers of housing. You've got free market apartments where the rent can be whatever the landlord decides, and then you've got stabilized apartments. Now, these are apartments where the landlord doesn't control the final amount of rent. The city controls it. However, the city still has to come up with a rent that works for both landlords and renters.
I should not be paying $991 a month with 3 roommates in a rent-stabilized apartment.
Now, yes, a stabilized apartment is still much more affordable than a...
I live with 4 people, and I pay like $100 a month.
A market rate apartment, but to folks who need a stabilized apartment to remain in New York, any increase at all could be so much that even they have to vacate. Now, one woman said she was paying $900 to live in an apartment with 3 roommates. The new guidelines allowed for a 3% increase, roughly, and that would mean she pays an extra $27 a month. Now, you might not think that's a lot of money, But remember, in Brooklyn, the rent to income ratio is already over 30%. So people are already spending more than they should on rent. Every dollar amount in the wrong direction could be catastrophic for people and for families. Also, the cost of living in New York is so much that even a $100,000 a year salary, once you take into account the overall cost of
$27 is 1/3 of my rent. That's a lot of fucking money.
living, that gets whittled down to about $36,000 a year when compared to other major US cities and other parts of America. And Brooklyn residents aren't making $100,000 a year on average. If the average price of an apartment in your neighborhood is above what the average person can spend, it's pretty obvious why that's not gonna work long term, unless you make some drastic changes to how you live your life.
As nice as it would be to keep this as one bed just for yourself, you can halve the amount of money you're paying each month just by adding a second roommate. You have a room after all for them.
So then this would end up being like your kitchen / living area.
Yeah, you can fit a couch there pretty easily, and this is a queen size bedroom with the double closet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Maybe they're not saying use it as a one bedroom because there's the backyard door.
Yeah.
But you could.
Good.
This is a good spot for a bed right here.
Perfect.
And I guess you could go to Home Depot, you can get some paper shades for the window right here to like close it.
Yeah, and if you put the bed there, you could have a nice home office setup over here. You have the outlet for it.
How big of a couch you think you could get here?
I'd say a 4-seater at least.
A 4-seater?
Yeah.
Okay. But I guess that then means that the TV has to fit over here.
Yeah, you'd probably mount it over there. So instead of getting a big clunky table and putting it here to complement your couch, just get a standing.
This is absolute garbage, man. This is what they're paying almost $4,000 for. And you can't even comfortably put anything in it.
Bar cart, eat here, you're gonna save so much space.
And I guess that would double your counter space because it's next to the kitchen.
Exactly.
So I guess it just makes me look at this room a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Because now your whole life is in 80 square feet.
Yep.
You don't have like your bed and stuff in here and your office out there. This is everything.
By adding a roommate, you also only have to make $60,000 to live here. It halves what income you need.
Oh, so instead of 120, now you're at 60.
Yeah.
I guess for someone just starting out in New
That's
York,
still
this
an
could
insane
be the
amount of
only
money.
option. How long do you think somebody would live in a room like this?
I'd say at least 2 years for the price you're paying.
Do you think it's worth it to rent something like this and kind of downsize your life?
I think it totally depends on your situation. If living in this apartment will help you achieve something that you can't achieve living anywhere else, then yeah, it's worth it.
Most people that rent something like this, they've got...
If you're just trying to survive, dude, what are you doing? Get out. Like, you could legit just leave with one entire month's worth of rent, and you could use that for security deposit to get into a new home or into a new house, not a tiny apartment. You could get a house, rent a house, not buy one. I mean, if you went through the steps, you probably could with that amount, but just take 1, maybe even 2 months rent, just, you know, and you would be set. Just don't pay rent, leave. Take the money that you were going to pay for rent, leave. Go to somewhere like Southwest Missouri or Southeast Missouri or some, like, I don't know, Northern Alabama, and just rent a house. It's like you'd have a lot of money left over still too. You can get some furniture. That is insane.
Like a job, they're trying to get an education, they're starting a business, they've got some reason where they need the apartment other than just, I love it here and I enjoy paying for it.
I would hope so, otherwise you're wasting money.
2/3 of the
You're wasting your life.
apartments in New York City are occupied by renters who don't own. And as rents go up, the apartments people can afford just get smaller and smaller and smaller and tinier. Now this apartment is a 2-bedroom apartment and I live here with my family. But it's really tiny. Tiny kitchen. Oh, you think my kitchen's a mess? Let's see you make breakfast for 2 kids yourself. Your kitchen's gonna look like a tornado. This is also very New York. We don't have enough cabinet space, so inside the oven we keep pots and pans. And to be honest with you, this place is already a little bit too small for us. The rent was $4,000 when we moved in a year ago. It is stabilized. The rent went up to $4,200. We also pay an extra $300 a month for parking, so it's $4,500 all in for a place that we can't stay in forever. And when I looked at renewing the lease here, I checked to see what other apartments were available. And other Brooklyn apartments with two beds and
that
two
bathroom.
baths were $6,000 a month if the building also had an elevator. And a stabilized apartment is supposed to be an affordable apartment, but if the rent's stabilized and it's stabilized at a level that's already unaffordable, it makes sense that most people are being forced out of a neighborhood like this. If this is
The Fifth Element seems impossible now. Like there's no way New York would ever look like the awesome Fifth Element New York.
the cheap place, if this is the stabilized place, that extra $27, that matters. We don't need a ton of space, so we could probably make it here for a few more years, but when they get bigger, we're gonna either have to throw out all of our stuff, or the 4-year-old is gonna have a bunk bed in this room, and my hats are gonna have to go somewhere else. And no matter what part of New York City you live in, you're probably asking yourself this question: how long am I gonna be able to stay here? And if I can't stay here and I get priced out, where am I gonna go? Especially if I've already gone from Manhattan to an outer borough like Brooklyn. There is no Brooklyn if I'm already in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn's unaffordable. But what do you think? Is there a reason to move to New York City? Would you move to New York City?
No,
and what do you think I should
absolutely
do?
not.
See you in the next video.
Move to the south, into a small town. Doesn't even have to be that small. It could be like 15,000, 30,000 people. You have some room to do some stuff, and your rent would be like, for a decent house, it'd be $1,000. Like, you'd be living in a nice house. Man, I feel sorry for these people. I feel sorry for everyone. I feel sorry for me. I feel sorry for you watching this. If there's anybody watching this, I don't know. I've been just kind of rambling to myself this whole time I've been making videos. It sucks to vote good people out, or vote good people in, vote bad people out. That's the only way this stuff's ever going to get fixed. They're turning us into a third world country. And you know what happens in third world countries? You get billionaire princes that have everything. They have so much that they don't even know what to do with. Lil Wayne was just given his choice of a Lamborghini because he was seen as being offended. So they just gave him a Lamborghini. That should not be happening.